What I'm about to tell you might hit you harder than you expect. Once you hear it, you'll finally see why the financial advice our parents trusted is quietly pulling us backwards. Right this moment, while you sit here, your money is slipping away. Not because someone robbed you, not because you made some reckless gamble. It's draining out through a system that's completely legal, polished to look helpful, and designed so you never notice the leak. By the time we're done, you'll know exactly how much you lose every single year, the 3 silent traps that keep draining your wealth, and the protection plan that took me 2 years of trial and error to crack. And you'll understand all of it in the next 20 minutes. But here's the part you can't ignore. The clock is running out. Not 10 years from now. Not 5. The gap to shield yourself is closing fast. We're not talking years anymore. We're talking months. And before we finish, I'll show you exactly why the urgency is real. If you want straight, unfiltered truth about what's happening to your money in the UK, hit like and subscribe to UK Economy Explained. I don't say things the banks enjoy, and I definitely don't make friends in Westminster, but what you're about to hear might be the most important wake-up call you get this year. Let me paint you a picture. A few weeks ago, I met Sarah, a secondary school teacher from Manchester. She's 42, responsible, steady, exactly the kind of person you'd expect to be financially secure. For nearly 2 decades, she's done everything right, paid the mortgage on time, put £300 a month into savings, followed every bit of advice she was given. She asked me to take a proper look at her numbers. When I showed her what had really been happening to her money, the color drained from her face. 18 years of careful saving, and she was down £57,000. Not because she made wild decisions. Not because life threw her some awful twist. She lost that money by doing everything she was told. And here's the part that should scare you. Sarah isn't unusual. She's the blueprint. If you're earning anywhere between £30,000 and £80,000 a year, chances are the same thing is happening to you right now. Let me break down why. The Bank of England assures you inflation is sitting at 2.1%. Your savings account on a good day gives you about 1.5%. So on paper, it looks like you're losing a modest 6% a year. Uncomfortable, sure, but manageable, except that 2.1% number is a fantasy. And the people quoting it know exactly what they're doing. The inflation basket they use, the list of items they track to calculate the rate, hasn't matched real British living for decades. It's filled with things that keep getting cheaper: televisions, gadgets, products you replace every few years. Meanwhile, the things that drain your wallet every single month are skyrocketing. Your energy bill didn't creep up a couple of percent, it exploded. Your weekly food shop didn't nudge from £60 to £61, it's jumped to £95. Council tax, rail tickets, insurance, fuel, childcare, the unavoidable costs of being alive in Britain are climbing 8%, 10%, 12%, sometimes more. Independent analysts have been shouting this for years, and no one in power wants to hear it. The type of inflation ordinary families feel, the one investment firms quietly use when they measure their own returns, isn't the polite 2% the headlines talk about. It's closer to 8%. Some months it jumps toward 10%. So let's break down the numbers nobody in banking ever wants you to run. Say you've saved £20,000. Your bank rewards you with a 1.5% interest rate. That's £300 a year before tax. Not terrible at first glance. But with everyday costs rising around 8%, your savings would need to grow by roughly £1,600 just to tread water. That means that while the bank hands you £300, you're actually sliding backwards by about £1,300 in real buying power every single year. Now think bigger. If you've put away £50,000, the hit is over £3,000 annually. At £100,000, you're losing around £6,500 in real terms. You believe you're doing the responsible thing, but the value of your hard-earned savings is leaking away like water through a cracked bucket. And here's the part that should make you uneasy. None of this is accidental. Banks know the game. They borrow at roughly 5.25% from the Bank of England, then charge you sky-high rates on loans and credit cards, often above 20%. They generate huge profits while paying you crumbs. But the uncomfortable truth is that the government isn't stepping in to protect you. In fact, they benefit from this slow squeeze. It's all tied to something with a dull, harmless name: fiscal drag. Don't let the term fool you. It's one of the most effective ways a government can take more from the public without ever raising tax rates. Here's how the trick works. They pick tax thresholds, the personal allowance at £12,570, the higher rate kicking in at £50,270, and then they simply freeze them. Those numbers haven't moved since 2021, and the plan is to keep them frozen until at least 2028. Meanwhile, wages creep up because of inflation. You might get a 3% pay rise. Maybe 4% if you're lucky. It feels like progress, but it isn't. Those small increases push more of your earnings into higher tax brackets, while the thresholds stay exactly where they are. So, year after year, without changing a single official tax rate, the government quietly collects more from you. That's the hidden cost of living people don't see. Your savings shrinking on one side, your tax burden expanding on the other. And the system is set up so you never notice it happening until the gap becomes too big to ignore. That small pay bump you get each year? It isn't progress. It's simply you trying to keep your head above water while the cost of everything rises around you. Your real spending power stays exactly where it was, but your headline salary gets bigger, and the tax system takes advantage of that, because once that higher number shows up on your payslip, you get nudged into the next tax band. Suddenly, you're handing over 40% on income that, once you adjust for prices, is no better than the money you earned 5 years ago when you were taxed at 20%. The Institute for Fiscal Studies has already mapped it out. By 2028, this quiet little trick will drag around 4 million people into higher tax brackets. 4 million ordinary workers, teachers, nurses, police officers, people who never imagined they'd be labeled high earners. But they will be not because they got rich, but because the government refused to update a couple of frozen thresholds. And let's be clear, this isn't some accounting mistake. It's intentional. It's the cleanest way for the Treasury to rake in more cash without ever admitting they've increased taxes. If a chancellor walked out tomorrow and said, "We're lifting income tax to 45%, you'd see outrage across the country. But if they sit quietly and let inflation push you into those brackets instead, they get the revenue, and you end up blaming everything except the policy itself. And here's what really stings. The people at the top barely feel this at all. The genuinely wealthy don't rely on salaries. They pull money from dividends, capital gains, corporate structures, offshore accounts, income streams that glide past fiscal drag, as if it doesn't exist. The squeeze lands squarely on the middle class, while the richest carry on untouched. Everything about this setup is aimed at the middle, the people who actually work for their money, save carefully, follow every rule, and still get squeezed from all sides. But fiscal drag is only half the story. The other piece is even more damaging because it goes after the one thing Brits have always believed was safe: their homes. For half a century we've been fed the same comforting idea: property always climbs. Buy a place, build equity, retire peacefully. Entire generations saw their house earn more than they did in their careers. So you put every spare penny toward a deposit, scrape together enough for a 95% mortgage, sign up for a 5.5% interest rate, and tell yourself you're securing your future. But let's look at the one calculation estate agents hope you never sit down to do. You pick up a £300,000 home with a £15,000 deposit. That leaves you borrowing £285,000. Over 25 years at 5.5%, the total you hand back is about £470,000. That's roughly £185,000 just in interest. Your £300,000 home ends up costing almost $500,000. And what about price growth? Surely the house will be worth more. That's the myth. In real terms, once you strip out inflation, property values barely budge over long stretches. The numbers look bigger, yes, but everything else inflates right alongside them. So you feel wealthier on paper while your real buying power barely shifts, and that's before you add the unavoidable extras: council tax, insurance, maintenance, repairs. Those costs eat another 2 to 3% a year. Add it all together, and the average homeowner isn't climbing a ladder, they're treading water. They just never run the full equation. But here's the part that should genuinely worry you. Last year alone, Overseas buyers poured around £4 billion into UK property. Middle Eastern investment funds, Chinese corporations, wealthy elites from countries most people never think about. They're snapping up homes not to live in, but to stash wealth. Physical safety deposit boxes with British postcodes. In some of London's priciest areas, 6 out of 10 new-build flats are sold to foreign investors before UK buyers even get a look in. And many of these homes remain dark and empty. You've probably seen these streets yourself. Beautiful new buildings with row after row of dark, empty windows. No kids playing. No lights on. No neighbors. Just investment shells quietly rising in value while the people who actually live and work in the area are pushed out because they simply can't compete with global cash, and the government watches it happen without lifting a finger.
Why?
Because they can't afford for house prices to fall. The whole British economic model leans on the belief that property is worth more every year. If that illusion cracks, if prices return to something normal, the shock hits the banks first, then pensions, then the wider economy. So the system keeps inflating, and you keep paying, convinced you're building stability when you're really just underwriting a mountain of debt. But unbelievably, this still isn't the end of the story. There's a third lever being pulled in the background, and it makes the rest of this look almost harmless. The Bank of England is deep into developing what they're calling the digital pound. It sounds harmless enough, like an upgrade to modern banking. Faster payments, safer transactions, a clever new system for the 21st century. That's the sales pitch. But the reality is far more serious. This isn't theory. The bank has released documents. They've allocated funding. They're constructing the technology right now. The tentative window for launch is somewhere between 2025 and 2028. And while the public explanation is all about inclusion and efficiency, the capabilities baked into this kind of currency go far beyond convenience. Look at China's digital yuan for a glimpse of what's possible. Money with an expiry date, funds that won't work if the government decides your score is too low, controls on where you can spend based on location. That's not speculation. That's already happening. The UK insists they would never go down that road. But these are the same institutions that insisted they'd never shut down the entire country until they did. They claimed they would never unleash hundreds of billions of pounds of printed money until they did. They said tax thresholds wouldn't be frozen for years, and here we are. The technology for financial control isn't an idea. It's being built, budgeted, tested right now. And once it exists, the temptation to use it becomes impossible to ignore. Once the system is in place, how it's used won't be a technical question. It'll be a political one. And politics changes with the wind. Do you really want your savings to exist only as digits on a server, alterable at the press of a button by whoever happens to win the next election? That's not fear-mongering. That's simply looking at the pattern. Every crisis brings more control, not less. And right now, they're constructing the most powerful tool of all while reassuring you it's just for your comfort. This is where many people take a wrong turn. They panic. They buy gold bars, stockpile tins, dive headfirst into whatever cryptocurrency is trending. They think the only way to survive is to exit the system entirely. But you can't beat a machine this large by hiding from it. Stuffing cash under the mattress won't save you. Running into the wilderness won't save you. Here's the truth most people never hear. The way forward isn't escape. It's strategy. You have to use the same playbook the wealthy have quietly relied on for decades. And everything they use is completely legal, sitting in plain sight, but never advertised to the average saver. Let's start with the first pillar. How you grow your money, not the growth your local bank brags about. Their 1.5% rates are a joke. You get a better return burning your notes and using the heat. What you actually need is a stocks and shares ISA. And here's where most people sabotage themselves. They start picking individual companies. They try predicting the next boom. They chase trends. And they lose. The wealthy don't do that. They buy broad, global index funds that follow the entire world market. For example, the FTSE All-World Index has delivered around 8.7% a year over 3 decades. After costs, you're sitting close to 8%, which keeps you level with real inflation instead of drowning under it. And there's a trick hardly anyone knows. Your old ISA accounts from previous years aren't stuck. You can move them into better ones without touching your tax-free allowance. Most people don't even realize they can do this, and the banks certainly won't remind you. A lot of people don't even realize how much money they've left scattered across old accounts. ISAs from jobs they moved on from, accounts opened years ago and never checked again. All sitting there earning scraps. That's dead money. Gather it. Move it. Put it somewhere that actually grows. You're allowed to put in £20,000 a year, double that if you're a couple. Keep that up for a decade, and you've funneled £400,000 into a tax-free shelter. Leave it working for 20 years and, with steady compounding, you're staring at something in the region of £700,000. No capital gains tax. No dividend tax. No income tax. It's one of the last legal spaces the government hasn't torn apart. The second pillar is premium bonds, but not for the jackpot fantasy everyone talks about. Your nan might love them, but they're not about getting rich. They're about invisibility. You can put in up to £50,000, and instead of interest, you're entered into monthly prize draws. People shrug because the average return is roughly 4.4%. But the value isn't the return, it's what they don't show. That money won't show up in means tests. It isn't counted when they assess you for care costs. You can withdraw it instantly with zero penalties. And here's the strange twist. It's the only product where the government guarantees your money, yet the rest of the government systems don't track it. That contradiction is exactly why it works as a shield. The third pillar is understanding offshore investing without drifting anywhere near the illegal stuff the headlines love to shout about. The phrase offshore has been wrecked by scandals and celebrity leaks, so people assume it means hiding money on secret islands. That's nonsense. Owning assets in another country is completely legal, completely normal, and becoming increasingly important. It spreads your risk, protects you from policy changes here, and gives you options if the domestic system tightens even further. The wealthy have been doing this for generations. The only difference is that nobody ever tells the rest of the country how it actually works. You don't need to be a millionaire to move some of your wealth offshore. As a UK resident, you can open investment accounts in places like Ireland, Luxembourg, or the Channel Islands with perfectly ordinary sums. These aren't shadowy tax havens. You still report everything to HMRC, you still pay whatever tax the UK charges, but your assets sit outside the blast radius of whatever the next government decides to introduce. If capital controls appear, if a wealth tax lands, if the pound nosedives, your savings are already sitting in euros or dollars in Dublin or Jersey. And you can get started with amounts most people actually have, around £5,000 for Ireland, roughly £10,000 for Jersey or Guernsey. This isn't about hiding money. It's about insulating it from political risk, and that's where timing becomes brutal. The opportunity to do this isn't permanent. It's shrinking. The March 2026 budget is shaping up to be the most aggressive in decades, with early whispers about new wealth levies, higher inheritance tax, and possible limits on ISAs. The Bank of England begins testing the digital pound in 2027. Once that system is active, money movement becomes traceable in a way we've never seen before. Interest rates are expected to stay high until at least 2028, squeezing homeowners, freezing the property market, and keeping prices elevated. Then 2029 arrives, the year a huge wave of baby boomers hits retirement, blowing a crater in public finances and forcing tax hikes no politician wants to talk about. By 2030, the overall financial environment in the UK will be unrecognizable. The protective options you have today will not be there forever. Realistically, you have 5 years at best. More likely 3. Maybe less, but here's the part most people won't face. Information only matters if it turns into action. Thousands will hear everything I've just said, agree with every word, maybe even send the video to a mate, and then go straight back to a savings account paying them 1.5% while inflation eats them alive. Hope is not a strategy. Decisions are, they won't. And they never will. Because hope isn't a financial strategy. Neither is anger, despair, or waiting for political change to magically save you. The system isn't broken, it's working exactly as designed. Just not for you unless you decide to change that right now. Open the ISA this week. Research global index funds today, make the transfers, set up the standing orders. Move your emergency fund into premium bonds. Compare international investment platforms. Start small if you must, but start. Because wealth protection isn't about being rich. It's about not becoming poor. And in a system built to slowly drain the middle class, standing still is the same as moving backwards. Inflation theft happens every single day. Fiscal drag tightens with every pay rise. The property ladder keeps rising while you're still climbing. The only real question is this: are you going to be a victim or an exception? The wealthy aren't smarter than you. They don't work harder. They simply understand the game being played. And now, so do you. Take Sarah, the teacher I mentioned at the start. After I walked her through these strategies, she moved her dormant ISAs into global index funds. A week later, she opened a Channel Islands account with £12,000. She maxed out her and her husband's premium bonds. 6 months later, when I checked in, her portfolio was up 9%. But that wasn't the real win. She told me she sleeps better. Because she's not hoping the system changes. She's protected no matter what happens. That's the difference between knowing and doing. And every month you delay costs you money you will never get back. Compound interest works both ways, either for you or against you. There's no neutral ground, no pause button, no timeout while you think about it. Right now, this very minute, your wealth is either growing or shrinking. The solutions exist. The strategies are legal. The window is open, but it won't stay open for long. The UK economy is entering a phase where traditional financial advice isn't just outdated, it's dangerous. The rules your parents lived by no longer apply. Save money, buy a house, trust the system, worked in a world of expansion. We're not in that world anymore. We're in the era of extraction, where growth has been replaced by redistribution, where inflation isn't a problem but a policy, where the middle class is mined for revenue like a dwindling resource. But here's the truth they hope you never hear. You don't have to be part of that resource. You can be one of the people who sees what's coming and steps aside. One of the people who uses the system's own tools to build immunity against its exploitation. One of the people who realizes that in a rigged game, the only winning move is to play a different game entirely. Nobody is coming to save you. The government needs your money too badly. The banks profit from your confusion. Your employer just needs you to show up. The only person who can protect your financial future is you. And you've just spent 20 minutes learning exactly how to do it. The rest is execution. Subscribe to UK Explained. Report for more UK financial truth the mainstream media won't touch. The financial establishment doesn't want you informed. They want you compliant. We're here to make sure you're neither. Your wealth, your future, your choice. The clock is ticking.